So I started a new job, and to my surprise, nobody there so far I've seen has taken a meal break. So I took to the internet to find out, is this legal? It is. And I didn't know this. With my cushy jobs in the past, was graced with a break. Before living in Michigan, I lived in Illinois, which is one of the only states in the United States that has laws protecting employees so that you can take a decent break. Now, in Michigan, that's not the case. So, the fact that nobody has really been taking like a meal break or something like that, totally legal. And it got me thinking, where is the employee handbook for this place? Anyway, rant over. The main part of this video is just me trying to talk about how there is no federal law or protections that involve employees receiving any kind of lunch break. So, specifically, this is not written into the Fair Labor Standards Act. And so, this is up to the states to decide if they want employers to mandate some kind of break, a lunch break, um, or even if there isn't a state law, uh, whatever employer, they can decide if they want to write that into their policy. So there are a few exceptions to this lack of lunch policy. So one, like I said, if an employer has a written policy, they're bound to follow it, especially if it's like written down. This is why I'm like, where's the employee handbook at my job right now? Like, we need that. So we have something to fall back on to be like, hey, you said this and you're not doing that. So if they do not follow their own policy, that's a violation and you can report them. Of course, it will depend on where you work and if there is a body where you can specifically report a violation of policy, or if people are approachable within wherever you work. Um, if not, there are like other like departments depending on your state that you could talk to about various infractions, like withheld breaks, like them saying like, oh, like, yeah, clock out, but then keep working. That's a violation. That's not okay. And a lot of people actually will just like work through their breaks, even if they're allowed to um, discontinue all work activities during that break. Because it's just so normalized in our society to just like keep working without breaks. So much so that there's no law. that and so that brings me to exception number 2. So if an employee or an employer does have a break policy, like short breaks that last 15 to 20 minutes, you don't have to clock out for those per the Fair Labor Standards Act. You are entitled to pay. So if your employer is saying, well, you have to clock out, or you're not getting paid for this break that you took that's like 15 minutes, they are in violation. All right, and then exception number 3, specifically from the Department of Labor, is that employees under the age of 18 may not work more than 5 hours without a documented 30-minute uninterrupted break. And daily records should reflect the starting and ending of shifts, as well as a 30-minute interrupted break. Basically, if you are a minor under the age of 18, you are within your right to have a 30-minute uninterrupted break, meaning during those 30 minutes, you are not doing anything work related. It's all about just stepping away from the work and refreshing. So if you are a teenager out there and your job is like, well, like, can you just like help us some more? I know that you're clocked out, but we're slammed. Like, that's not okay. So they're in violation. Number 4. So according to the Occupational Safety Health Act, or OSHA, employers must provide employees with toilet facilities, and it prohibits that employers from imposing unreasonable restrictions on the use of the facilities. And so on the other side of that is that you can't really take an excessive amount of time in the bathroom, and that you should let your employer know about your absence. But, the restroom is a special place. So there are some exceptions to the fact that there's no federal law mandating that everybody gets some kind of break. So given that it's the state's responsibility to decide that, I compiled a list of states where there is some kind of break related policy that is mandated. So it's about 19 states, and on the list is California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, I was born there, Kentucky, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nevada, sorry, I said that twice. New Hampshire, New York, North Dakota, Oregon, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Vermont, Washington, and West Virginia. There are some honorable mentions, and it's just very interesting how policy can vary from state to state. So they are Maryland, and they have some kind of break policy like for certain retail employees. Not sure exactly what that means, but I'm sure that's somewhere on their website. Missouri, and that is for coal miners, and they get at least 1 hour of break, which that's kind of criminal. They're working in the coal mines, like, what the fuck? And they also have something about employees in the entertainment industry, so 15 minutes for every 2 hours of work. Interesting. Nebraska, and so that's employees that work at assembling plants or in mechanical establishments. There's New Mexico, where it's specifically factory employees get an hour around noontime, and mercantile workers get at least 30 minutes around noontime as well. Then there's Pennsylvania, where seasonal farm workers get about 30 minutes per every 5 hours worked. And then Wisconsin is like honorable mentions, because their Wisconsin Administrative Code recommends breaks, but it's not mandated. So, too long didn't see. Not having a meal break in most states is totally legal, and it sucks, and that should change. I tried to do some research. I used like California as like a sample state to try to figure out like, well, how did this law come into being? And I had a hard time finding information. Um, if you happen to be watching this video and you know something about um, employment law, labor law, leave some comments there. Um, if you have like horror stories, also share those. I did see like a number of threads where like I think someone said, "Oh, I work at Best Buy," and it's totally like within like the employer's kind of like mohaha, plan to schedule like under schedule their employees so that they're not within the limits of taking a half hour break. So like, hey, I'll give you 7.5 hours, that way you don't get your full hour break. Shameful. Anyway, I hope you learned something from this video. Sorry it's so long. I just am kind of a little bit passionate about this right now. Of course, this is the tiniest tip of the iceberg in terms of the shit that people get away with, in terms of how employees are um, mistreated, I think. I mean, I can see how it's hard to try to enforce some kind of break policy on the federal level, um, given that, like, the landscape of every state is different. So, like, how I had mentioned, Missouri with coal workers, I mean, has to do with, like their geography, or, like, also just like the political kind of leaning in the state, perhaps. I mean, I think there are like some red states on this list where they do have some kind of break policy. Um, but yeah, there are just a lot of factors on the state level, and also a lot of factors um, in terms of the employer, like depending on the kind of work, and their values too. Like sometimes it also comes down to their values. Like, do they care about their employees enough so that they're nourished and rested and can do their best work? Even though I think that capitalism and work is bullshit, and I wish nobody would have to work so that they can sustain some kind of living. It's terrible. Anyway, hopefully, I'll make some other kinds of videos on similar topics. But I hope you learned something. Bye.